I'm Alex Hera. A year and a half ago, on May 18th, 2020, I began working on an immersive narrative webseries, or unfiction project, or ARG, called Walker Creek. On November 7th, 2021, it came to a close. This has been educational, fun, amazing, and, in some ways, absolutely terrible. This is my story. Walker Creek, formerly titled Walker Creek Broadcast Station, ran from October 2020 to November 2021. In the series, Daniel Shepard begins uploading old 1980s VHS tapes that he inherited from his recently deceased father, who lived in his hometown of Walker Creek, Washington. He quickly realizes that not all is as it seems in the tapes, with a town-wide conspiracy of shapeshifters, called Skinwalkers or the Hosted, and a small group of rebel humans attempting to stop them in 1989 and the present day. For those who don't know, ARG stands for Alternate Reality Game. In essence, this is a story told over the internet as if it's real, with videos filmed in a realistic way, fictional characters using social media to interact with players, and sometimes with fake websites made for the story. Often they use coded messages that must be deciphered as gameplay. This is the type of series that Walker Creek is. To tell this story, I need to go back. Past October 2020 when Walker Creek began, past May 2020 when I began working on it, even past my first ARG attempt in 2019, all the way back to 2012. As a child on the internet in the early 2010s, I was indoctrinated into the Slenderman craze, and therefore into the web series known as Marble Hornets. This was one of the first independent ARGs to gain widespread attention, and this is where my horror, ARG, immersive narrative, online mystery obsession came from. From this point on, while I wasn't obsessed with it yet per se, I did gravitate towards the idea of online mysteries. Five Nights at Freddy's, Cicada 3301, The Sun Vanished, and Local 58. However, after all of this, 2019 was the year I truly dove into ARGs. The web series Dad was brand new, and it was my latest obsession. After a few months of being a loyal participant, I wanted more. More than simply dipping my toes into the unfiction scene like I had in years prior. I tore through every ARG-focused video I could find, and looked for new ones to participate in. It wasn't long before I was itching to make an ARG of my own, and thus, This Town Has No People was created. Inspired by The Sun Vanished and Daisy Brown, the series was about someone who wakes up with his town completely abandoned and aliens invading. It was filmed with iPhones and never actually showed the aliens. It, of course, sounds very original, unique, and not at all boring. There were a few other aspects, like a conspiracy theorist having a website and a second channel trying to investigate the aliens, a military character speaking in codes to help players, and a few other things, but it was pretty bad. Close to the quality of the projects you typically see on the ARG subreddit. I wrote and planned the entire series in advance, and planned to film and edit the entire thing before I even started to upload. I ended up filming around 75% of it, then I realized it was horrible and fell into almost every ARG cliché that existed, so I scrapped it. It's sitting on a hard drive, never to be seen again. But it did have a few important benefits. I learned what not to do in an ARG, and I realized I had a lot to learn. But even more than that, This Town Has No People is what made me realize that my true passion in life is filmmaking. After This Town Has No People, I went back to the drawing board. That fall, I focused on making short films, writing scripts, and learning proper filmmaking techniques. However, ARGs came calling again. I had to do a large research paper for my English class. It could be on any topic I was interested in. Any topic. So there was an obvious choice in my mind. Alternate reality games. I worked on this paper intently for 2 months. I interviewed inside a mind over the internet. I went over hundreds of websites, articles, and videos about unfiction, their structure, their purpose, their mechanisms. The paper was 19 pages long, and it only contained a fraction of what I actually learned about unfiction and alternate reality games. I had learned a lot, but I was still on the traditional filmmaking path. For now. March 2020. No more filmmaking. At least, no more filmmaking with groups. My obsession with the analog horror series Local 58 had been growing over quarantine, as well as my frustration at filmmaking being cancelled for the foreseeable future. I thought about making a new ARG. I called it the Coalescence Network. It was going to be a combination of analog horror and normal modern-day ARG storytelling, something rarely seen at all and never done on the scale I had imagined. In Coalescence Network, mysterious TV broadcasts are discovered coming from an alternate universe where technology never evolved past the 1980s due to a virus destroying the world. Our main character has to figure out the truth behind the mysterious universe and the rebel group within it, so he begins collecting broadcasts, making vlogs, and seeking out help from bloggers online who have information. Sound at all familiar? Walker Creek Broadcast Station began life on May 18, 2020, as a school project. The assignment was simple: create a video using masking, a filmmaking term which refers to the practice of using a mask to protect a specific area of an image from being altered by changes made to the rest of the image, which is what you see in this scene from Nightlife, or this one from Mental Health Outreach, or this one from survey results, just to name a few. I'm always extra when it comes to filmmaking, so I decided to combine a few things that I was interested in at the time: Local 58, skinwalkers or shapeshifters, and cool lighting techniques. With the idea of the Coalescence Network in my head, I wanted to start small and get some practice with analog horror creation before beginning that project. So, these clips were recorded. A skinwalker breaking into someone's home and replacing them. Simple enough. At the time, this was not Luke Delore. There was no concept of the Worms, the Harvest Star, the Elder Ones, Daniel Shepard, the tour guide, or any of the other Walker Creek aspects you know and love. It simply existed. I threw together a creepy bit about the skinwalkers warning you to come out at night, a cliché emergency broadcast alert like every other analog horror series to ever exist, a vague, mysterious broadcast hijacking by an unknown party, and voila! Nightlife was born. The first episode of Walker Creek, 5 months before the series officially began. From here, I kind of forgot about Walker Creek. It was a one-off. I put it on my Hera channel, and I moved on with my life. Well, by moving on, I mean getting insanely depressed over the summer and not doing anything creative until August, but close enough. In August, I began a new film class. I was incredibly depressed, lonely, and unhappy with the state of the world and the state of my own life. In September, though, that class helped me rekindle my love for filmmaking. But I was a little strapped for ideas. So, on September 4th, 2020, I turned back to Walker Creek. That week, I had thought to myself, I've never created a sequel to anything. And just like that, Episode 2, Police Broadcast, was born. Then, during its production, the idea for the entire Walker Creek ARG was born as well, though not in a form that resembles Walker Creek as it is today. Obviously, an ARG had been on the list of my things to do for a really, really long time. It was inevitable. I just didn't know that it would happen then, at one of my lowest points. Police Broadcast posed an interesting question, though. How do I expand this world that I created? It meant answering questions posed in nightlife. Who hijacked the station? What does hosting mean? Who is that kid that saw his doppelganger? What authorities wanted people to leave their doors unlocked? It was the start of a technique I used extensively throughout Walker Creek's production. I worked backwards. I would create a plotline or a character, and then solve the mystery of how it fits into the rest of the story after the fact. Keep in mind, this is not a good technique for most people. In most cases, it'll result in a sloppy, confusing, unsatisfying mess of a story. But with Walker Creek, it worked. There's multiple reasons, which I could talk about in a whole 5-minute segment that I did actually write, but I thought it was kind of boring, so just to keep it short and simple. First, I planned the series and overall plot in advance following Police Broadcasts so that I knew everything except the small details. Second, I was patient and I waited weeks or months to actually resolve mysteries, giving myself time to think and build up all the other aspects to help it fit together. For example, Light Drinker 97 was not officially Andrea Illman until May 2021, 2 months after I actually debuted that channel. And third, I had tight-knit lore, and there was very strict, internally consistent world building that made it much easier to solve mysteries and create well-fitting puzzle pieces. I guess in the most basic sense, be really creative, really patient, and super obsessed with lore, and my strategy might turn out okay. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't try it. Anyway, I answered the questions of nightlife. Who hijacked the station? Humans rebelling against the Skinwalkers, led by some guy named David. What does hosting mean? Well, I guess they have to be some sort of parasite that goes inside humans. Who is that kid that saw his doppelganger? I don't know, throw in some random name, Luke, I guess. What authorities wanted people to leave their doors unlocked? The police. Let's make the next video about them. So, Police Broadcast was born. It was made in a week, and in that time I educated myself on how to make videos look more accurate to the 1980s, since the original nightlife was definitely not. So I figured out how to do the blurry visuals, 4:3 aspect ratio, and I ended up maintaining a very strict policy from here forward to avoid anachronisms, meaning I had to do a new cut of nightlife as well, in which I remade the emergency alert system to be more accurate to the original 1980s emergency broadcast system. From this point on, I began planning a whole series. At first, I was simply going to make a small-scale analog horror series similar to Local 58, Gemini Home Entertainment, and Analog Archives, a self-contained, no-context series of 1980s local VHS tapes. But after Police Broadcast, I started on Signal Towers, wrapping up the broadcast hijackings arc, and beginning the Mayoral Election arc with Theodore Ederson for mayor. But these tapes weren't enough for me. I knew there was a whole world there to tap into. I had already been cannibalizing ideas from the Coalescence Network, so I figured, why not take one more? I began writing a modern-day story. A very small, largely irrelevant main story told only through social media until the very end of the series. No Matt vlogs, with Matt barely existing at all, no Nick Osborne, no Adam Kruger, no tour guide, not even a strict villain. I still wanted the focus to be on the VHS tapes. I wasn't committed yet. Obviously, a lot changed over the next few months. First up in the modern day was the blog, which I decided would be owned by Trevor McNill. It was slow work and it took 3 weeks to complete. At the time I thought that was the worst of the writing. Little did I know that the private archive, message archive, and Rebel website were still to come. Trevor's blog was always something I cared about. He was really the most human character in Walker Creek. He's an old man, lonely after the natural death of his wife, who misses his hometown. No more, no less. Like Daniel, he's thrust into this crazy situation where he learned the truth about his hometown. But this did present a problem. It doesn't really make sense that he'd go off and be a major member of the investigation with his backstory. Plus, there's the fact that he's literally 80 years old and in Texas during the series. So, what can he actually do? I had the Louise Peterson connection up my sleeve, but after that, Trevor really had no purpose other than exposition. he got the unfortunate short end of the stick, largely forgotten about as a character until the end of the series. One of my biggest regrets when it comes to Walker Creek. As the month continued on, I realized that I needed to figure out when exactly the series would start. I had 3 tapes and a blog site already completed, and I had already chosen October 23rd as the date of the Harvest Festival, due to the Fallout franchise, in which the nuclear war occurred on October 23rd, 2077. So, October 24th became the release date since Daniel's dad died at the Harvest Festival. With this in mind, I had to get a few last-minute things together. And by a few last-minute things, I mean spontaneously deciding to create 2 new websites and a whole extra video for the modern-day story. My plan originally was not to lean into the modern day too much. I wasn't even going to mention it outside of Daniel's social media. But I realized that literally nobody would ever see it or realize, and that the ending of the series with the modern day vlogs would come completely out of left field. So I decided to make it a real thing. I made a quick video heavily inspired by Marble Hornets introducing the story, with no actor for Daniel since I didn't have one, a vague super short letter with no information about Daniel's dad's identity because I didn't know the solution to the mystery, and some random B-roll because I didn't have anything else. Boom, done. Yet, I knew I could go further. I created a small website for the Tourism Bureau mentioned in Nightlife. Just for world building, I said to myself. Then I created an Instagram account and made the Harvest Festival survey, the first actual gameplay of Walker Creek. Just for world building. I also planned for the archive, which would be locked behind some Cicada 3301-esque puzzles. Again, just for world building. But I didn't want to actually put in the effort to create the archive in October, so I just made the Contact Us for Access page, and called it a day. Wrong choice. But anyway, once these were complete and we reached October 24th, 2020, everything went live. And then there was silence. 0 views, 0 subscribers, 0 attention. I wasn't surprised at all, but I can't say I wasn't disappointed. So I waited, and I worked. During October 2020, the work was slow and tedious, but still fun. I was working on the blog and the modern day story, editing signal towers, and beginning work on episode 4, Dangerous Individual. Now, Walker Creek originally had a very different lineup in terms of the VHS tapes. Well, not very different, but different enough to be noteworthy. As you can see, there were a few tapes that were cut, like Council Meeting or Witch Trial, and there were a few that were altered in their premise, like Community Picnic becoming Harvest Festival 1989, or Walker Creek Astronomy becoming Observatory Report. Originally there were 15 tapes, and then it became 19. Dangerous Individual, the next tape in the lineup, was intended to be a major exposition dump about David Trenson and the rebellion. It was going to be a weather report, which I actually reused here. During this report, an alert would come on screen, and it would explain that David Trenson was the leader of the rebellion, and that he was a dangerous individual that should be reported or eliminated. I ended up scrapping the whole video because it wasn't scary, and it was a whole 3 or 4 minute video for 2 sentences of exposition that won't even be relevant for another 4 months. In November, I reshuffled the order and decided to make Hunting PSA next. I placed the David Trenson information intended for Dangerous Individual at the end of Hunting PSA, introduced some creepy stuff about the hosted, and shoehorned in another mayoral ad, this time for Ederson's opponent, Alan Brown. As November continued on, I realized that I wanted to add a live action element to Hunting PSA. I had a few ideas as to what this would be, but eventually settled on a POV recording of a hunter tracking deer footprints in the forest, which would then turn into human footprints. But the whole idea of making fake footprints really didn't work that well. At first I tried doing it with Connor, who had previously helped me with This Town Has No People.
My name's Connor Laurel, and I play Matt Seekins.
But it looked like shit, so I redid it with my girlfriend at the time, Anna.
Hi, my name is Anna, my character is Louise Peterson, the tour guide.
This was the first time that I actually brought in other people to help me with Walker Creek. The start of my crew. One more thing introduced in Hunting PSA was the Skinwalker language, Hosted Runes, or Yvrasilian. This was actually a leftover from This Town Has No People. The file on the secret language page that nobody ever found even still has TTHNP language as the file name. I used a website that converted handwriting into fonts, created a font, installed it, and began using it all over the place to add more mystery to the hosted and the series overall. This language originally wasn't supposed to be decipherable until February 2021, but the viewers being the viewers, cracked it in 1 week. November also brought with it the archive. Remember how I said I put it on hold and left it with the Contact Us to Gain Access page? Yeah, well, I never actually made the site. So once Walker Creek got a small amount of attention in the final week of November, people started contacting the email to gain access, and I didn't have any puzzles, or any content on the archive site. Big mistake. This happened on a Friday night. I put a little note on the Tourism Bureau website that said that they only respond to emails Monday through Friday, to buy myself time, and I went to work. I spent all of Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday building the archive site, writing the content, and then designing 10 puzzles to serve as gameplay to get in. Nothing complicated, but I was dedicated to staying away from ARG cliches. No binary code, base64, or any of the other codes you see all over the place. They're boring, lame, easy, and just not fun. So I focused on steganography and the Visionaire cipher, both of which were a running theme throughout all of Walker Creek's puzzles, all the way until the end. I had a few voice clips recorded by Anna for some added flavor within the puzzles, rather than having players read lines upon lines of text.
Congratulations on passing the first
Steps in residency verification.
I called her character the tour guide, and they were originally intended to be the leader of the Tourism Bureau, hence the name. The archive was supposed to contain database entries, media files, and messages from fictional users. This was obviously way too much to do in a weekend, or even a week. So I decided to tease the two further archives, the media archive and the message archive, which would be a problem for future Alex to worry about. I was done, and people were solving the puzzles and discussing the story. My story. It was amazing. My work had paid off, and I felt great. From this point on, Walker Creek was getting my full attention. I was interacting with viewers, planning larger scale content, and hinting towards future aspects like Matt. In the first few days, they simply discussed the videos and theorized about the town. Then, once the puzzles began, they went through a lot of effort to solve them, including some that I didn't expect. I had designed the puzzles to force them towards finding Trevor's blog, which they did, but then they did something unexpected. They looked into the Tourism Bureau Instagram account, into their followers list, and they found Adam Kruger, a character who wasn't supposed to exist. He was a leftover from a grander plan I had, which was to create 10 or 20 fake Instagram accounts for Walker Creek residents, just for the sake of immersion and world building. He was the only account I ever made for it, since Instagram obviously did not let me spam create 20 profiles. I literally forgot about him until viewers began contacting the character, asking questions about the archive puzzles. He really was not Adam at this point. When I replied, I played him as more of a simple resident with a mysterious side, not the leader of the Tourism Bureau or a rebel or any of the other things Adam was later on. He didn't have an actor, a character, or a purpose. But he was interesting to me, and interesting to the viewers too, weirdly enough. So I decided that he was going to be an actual thing. I threw in a tiny voice clip from him within the archive puzzles.
You do not know with what you are dealing with. Kind regards, Adam.
And then, as I wrote the first newsletter for the Tourism Bureau at the end of November, I realized that somebody needed to be writing the newsletter and answering the emails. And what character did I have laying around? Adam Kruger. So I put "written by Adam Kruger" at the bottom of the newsletter. A simple sentence that changed the course of the entire series. So, Adam exists because of you. December 2020. Things were running smoothly, I was happy, the new viewers were solving the initial puzzles, and this is when the scale and style of Walker Creek really started to change. The archive had already pushed me into imagining a larger, more detailed world, especially in the modern day. This is when the idea of Matt's vlogs, a feature-length finale, and a fully detailed alternate world came to fruition. After the completion of Hunting PSA, the next video I was preparing was Mayoral Election, the climax of 1988's storyline, and part of the second story arc about the election. I made the decision to bring in some of my friends to help with Walker Creek. I had a scene idea in mind, the loser of the election being tortured inside the Skinwalker base, the home. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed at least one other person, and due to the location, literally an abandoned building, I wanted a full crew. So I brought Anna once again to play the part of the torturer, and I told 2 others about the project to bring them in as crew for this torture scene. Michael, who later played Thomas Abernathy, and Connor, who later played Matt Seekins.
I don't know how I got involved.
This was a pivotal moment in Walker Creek. It was the first filmed content with a full crew, and also the first filming with a crew that I'd done since February of that year. We filmed safely, with masks and distancing as much as possible. December was a really nerve-wracking time to interact with others, but it was something worth doing. I cannot even describe the relief and the joy I felt being with the crew again that December, even if it was only a 60-second scene shot in one take. Walker Creek did a lot to pull me out of my depressive spiral in the end of 2020, and for that I will always be grateful. The final week of December was spent designing another puzzle chain, attached to the newly created phone numbers for Walker Creek. I wanted to make the world feel alive, and what better way than having a real phone number to call for the Tourism Bureau. This puzzle sequence also had the first 4 pieces of non-VHS tape watchable content. 4 audio messages containing conversations between the tour guide and Adam, elaborating on a few events in the lore and adding to their characters. I played Adam and Anna played the tour guide. Neither of us had a distinctive tone or voice, particularly me with Adam.
We need to stop them. After what they tried to do at the last festival. I will find them. I know what I'm doing.
Luckily, nobody ever seemed to notice or mind. Anyway, the point is, by December, the world of Walker Creek really was growing, and this was only the beginning. By January, I had begun writing scripts and planning out the storyline further. The first 2 things I wrote were the 1955 Rebellion hijackings with William Thames and Louise Peterson, with Thames intended for the media archive that I had in the works, while the Louise Peterson tape was intended for the main channel, as the culmination of Trevor's arc in which he joins the investigation. I already had the concept of Louise Peterson becoming the main villain, the tour guide, in my mind for multiple reasons. Of course, the largest was the story. I loved the idea of Louise Peterson and David Trenson both becoming skinwalkers after their rebellions failed. But I also made the decision for production reasons. I had a very limited selection of actors, and I knew that the tour guide's identity needed to have a major reveal. And I mean, Anna was already playing both.
He dragged me in, and I thought it would be like a short part, it wouldn't take too long, but then it ended up being till the end of the series. We also did the Louise Peterson shoot at my parents' room, and then I did, throughout the whole year, I did tour guide audios for the archive, and that was a pain in the ass. And then we did the filming for the end, so I wasn't too active on camera until the finale.
The 1955 video went through a lot of changes from its inception to its completion. In September, it wasn't going to have Louise Peterson at all, merely covering the festival in 1959, during which there'd be some creepy skinwalker comments about the town and their god, the Harvest Star. But this was just boring and useless, so I changed the setting to 1955 to avoid the Harvest Star aspect, and I added in the character of Louise. The final product was a hijacking similar to 7/22/89, where Louise would talk and then get captured. My overall idea was the theme of a cycle. Louise Peterson founds a rebellion in the 50s and hijacks the broadcast station. Her second-in-command, William, gets killed, and then she gets captured and turned into a hosted leader. Later, David Trenson founds a rebellion in the 80s, hijacks the broadcast station, loses his second-in-command, Noah, and eventually gets captured and turned into a hosted leader. A few months later, the character of Andy Richards, or the Unifier, was introduced in the lore, where, in the early 1900s, he founds a rebellion, loses his second-in-command Isaac Smithy, then gets captured and turned into a hosted leader. The theme was that there was no escaping the hosted. They couldn't be fought with a rebellion, and anyone who tried would eventually become just like them. This concept was going to be furthered even more in the finale, where, in the original draft, Adam was the modern leader, Nathaniel Topaz. He was going to lose his second-in-command, Luke, and get killed. Daniel would become the new leader, having already lost his second-in-command, Matt. And the implication was that nothing had changed by the end of the series. The cycle was going to keep happening, and Daniel would eventually become a hosted leader, just like Andy, Luis, David, and Adam before him. This was too dark, in my opinion, and after a while, not the message I wanted to send. January was also when I began working on the media archive. By the time the Harvest Festival 1955 tape was uploaded, the next tape, History of Walker Creek, was almost done. This gave me some breathing room to create the media archive content. I began writing the various scripts for the Order videos, Theodore Ederson videos, David Trenson radio hijackings, and more. Simultaneously, I was writing the first few Matt vlogs, the first video with Daniel receiving a box from the Skinwalkers, and a few other main channel videos. And just to add on to it, there were plenty of images and non-voiced content to produce for the archive as well. It was basically non-stop work on the media archive and future scripts for the end of January and through all of February. I didn't work on anything else, except for finishing up the History of Walker Creek tape, which was actually the first time I used another future crew member, Ariana, as an actor, but definitely not the last. Alongside this, I knew I needed to start on casting. I already had Connor doing the voice of Theodore Ederson, and I had Anna's casting as the tour guide and Luis locked in. That month, I brought in more actors. First was Elijah, who later played Daniel and was my filmmaking partner of 3 years.
My name is Elijah James King, and I play Daniel Shepard on Walker Creek Broadcast Station. We've been doing film projects and stuff together for, I think, since like 2018, 2019, so like this would be our 3rd year, and I think this is like our 4th or 5th project we've done together.
The second was Emmanuel, who later played David Trenson.
My name's Emmanuel, and my character's name is David Trenson. I came in, and I ended up being one of the characters.
I told them about the series, and we began meeting to talk about it, though only on Discord due to COVID-19. It took a while to get casting locked in. Originally, I wanted Emmanuel as Matt, but he said that he wanted to play David since he was a more complex, interesting character, with his later transformation into the Speaker, gray morality, and overall chaoticness.
I think I showed interest in David because, like, David has this wild side to him, and David has that wild characteristic that, like, I, like, so desire, and it's, like, one of those things where if I'm willing to show that emotion of just being crazy, which all of my friends know I'll just be crazy out of nowhere, it's, like, I could just naturally play the part.
Emmanuel did table reads, and I thought he did better with David than with Matt, so I agreed with him. Elijah had experience acting in plays, so I gave him the lead role. But then, a question was left. Who should play Matt? Michael was in the running, until Elijah introduced me to his friend Antonio, who I thought did amazingly in the table reads. Myself and my new crew met for a few weeks, until late February, getting character mannerisms down and preparing for the episodes. Then, Antonio dropped out, right before we planned to start filming. On one hand, this was a disaster. Filming had to be delayed by weeks while we got another actor up to speed. But on the other hand, it was an absolute blessing. I had already asked Connor to do the 3 Theodore Ederson recordings for the media archive, and I thought that would be the extent of his acting in Walker Creek. But with Antonio out, I asked him if he would be willing to play Matt, and after a while, he said yes.
Well, Alex first approached me back in, I think it was February now? That he wanted me to play this character called Matt in a web series called Walker Creek. And I said no at the beginning because I just didn't want to. But then he asked me again. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this because I like ARGs, and I was like, might as well try one.
Connor was actually the best choice for the vlogs. He had a car, almost nothing to do, and was really good at quickly memorizing large chunks of scripts. For example, 5 or 8 pages shot in only 1 or 2 days in public locations. Beyond that though, he was best friends with Elijah, who played Daniel, and therefore they would have perfect chemistry for the Matt-Daniel dynamic.
For the most part, when I was doing like stuff that included Matt, it was just me being myself with my friend Connor, who plays Matt.
Michael ended up playing Thomas Abernathy in the media archive recordings, with the potential to bring back his character later. And that was that. So by the end of February, we had our full cast. It was time to begin filming in March. Of course, I was still working on the media archive. It was a lot of effort. It was not a good month at all. I already had to deal with the Rebel attack event on February 3rd to avoid a content drought, But besides that, I was dealing with relationship issues, depression, and then on top of that, trying to make 50 pieces of Walker Creek content in less than a month. I was digging deep into the lore, expanding on it, starting new threads, and introducing new concepts that I knew would be important for the end. The speaker was created as a second-hosted leader with the secret identity of David Trenson. The benefactor was created to eventually solve the mystery of who George Shepard was. And finally, the Enforcer, or Luke Delore, was brought back. Work on the media archive was horrible. I was exhausted and overworked. I was obsessed, which translated into Daniel's character.
He's a very, obsessive kind of guy.
By the end of the media archive, I simply said, well, that's the worst of it. Now we get to do actual filmmaking and take it easy. I did not take it easy. Walker Creek was expanding. That much was clear. First up in March was the Media Archive puzzles, which I designed to be far more complex than the original archive puzzles. This sequence introduced the character and YouTube channel LightDrinker97. This was literally an improvised decision. I had an idea to make a video with a super weird title that would need to be specifically searched for on YouTube, so this needed a channel, and the video would need to have some sort of content. I threw together the idea of the LightDrinker97 channel and the content of the first video in only a few hours. I wrote some vague rhymes that could literally mean anything, threw in some background noise that sounded like a lake because Lake Denton was important in the lore, and I called it a day. Through March, I created 3 more videos in this style to prevent a content drought. At the time, I had no idea who LightDrinker97 was or why they were there. Their first identity was Adam, then it was an unnamed skinwalker or rebel fighting against the rest. But obviously, Lightdrinker changed over time, from weird rhymes and ominous messages to a much different style of content and a much different character. This was really the start of the theme park of horror concept that Walker Creek would later fully embrace. The early Lightdrinker videos were mostly aimless, but later they became more focused due to this theme park of horror concept in May. This idea was taken from an article on Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village, of which I was a huge fan. Game director Morimasa Sato said that one of the guiding principles in the development of the game was the idea of a theme park of horror. In an interview with IGN, the producer of the game said, "By implementing a wide array of horror elements within one game, Village is not only one of the most voluminous entries in the franchise, it also offers different kinds of horror experiences within one package." I realized that's what I wanted to create. A gigantic ARG, bigger than almost any others, with a multitude of high-quality aspects and moving parts, each with their own unique style. Even in March, I was already on my way to achieving this goal without realizing. LightDrinker97 had creepy abstract videos, which would later turn into more Knock plus 10 inspired videos after the theme park of horror concept. Matt's vlogs were being written, which would contain traditional unfiction vlog-style horror and storytelling, like Marble Hornets or the hundreds of others in this style. The puzzles and lore would have their own style, with readable content similar to SCP or creepypasta, and finally there were the tapes, with an analog horror style like Local 58. Just after the media archive release, I started on the next VHS tape, Mental Health Outreach. This episode was one of the best, if not the actual best, VHS tape in all of Walker Creek. It's dark and screwed up in concept, plus it's generally well executed in its pacing and design. I had the idea of bringing Luke back in early February, with the concept of a Terminator-type character that would be able to hunt down others in Walker Creek. I realized Luke would be a good way to tie back to the start of the series, and his appearance in the modern-day vlogs would tie the two eras together, with one continuous character. And to build on him further, I later had the idea of him being a blind skinwalker, like Jeff from Half-Life Alyx. Jeff was a terrifying enemy, and I loved the concept, so I was just like, yeah, I'm taking this. So I wrote Luke's scene in 2 minutes, acted it out in 5, and I had yet another character to play with from now on. Viewer reaction was stronger for this tape than literally any other. It was pretty great, but the tapes never reached this high again, at least in terms of horror. That was okay though. I always knew that I couldn't let audience reactions determine everything, and I had other things to worry about now. The modern day story with Matt and Daniel was slowly being developed. I still didn't have much outside of my outlines for the finale, but I knew that Adam would soon find Daniel and send him a message. I also needed a focus for Matt's vlogs. I knew he was Daniel's best friend living in Walker Creek, but beyond that, I just had a lot of scattered ideas for him and what to explore. The railroad, Main Street, the Walker Creek Library. but these were all scrapped. I didn't want him just wandering around random locations. It should be important, not pointless world building. Every aspect of a story, whether it's a movie or even an ARG, needs to have an explicit purpose. So I decided on Matt trying to break into the home and investigating each one of its entrances, leading to the finale confrontation at the lake. Our first attempted film day in the second week of March was bad. The Matt scripts were originally a lot shorter, around 4 pages each, so I wanted to try to do 2 or 3 vlogs in one day. Welcome to Walker Creek, Terror in Ramsey Park, and Waterfield Park Setback. It was an absolute disaster, as you could expect. I really should have listened to myself in January of 2021. I learned that having proper time and giving yourself more time than you even need is going to be really helpful in a film project. So, for a multitude of reasons, our first shoot day went really badly. We got 1 clip of Waterfield Park Setback and rushed filming Welcome to Walker Creek, with Connor reading off of a script the entire time. It sucked.
Welcome to Walker Creek! Right now, I'm sitting in Waterfield Park.
I was insanely demoralized, but I knew that I had to just get up and keep going. So, the next week, Connor and I went back on our own, much more prepared, trying to do only 1 vlog. It still took 4 hours to do the 3-page script, longer than any other vlog that we did afterwards. But the important thing is, we did it. Matt was ready to make his debut. Before March was over, we also filmed the second Matt vlog, Investigation Plan. Due to COVID, I didn't want to go inside Connor or Elijah's room and film for them, so I had them do it on their own. I wanted it to be set up like an actual dialogue scene in a movie, with multiple angles, following the 180-degree rule, etc. Investigation Plan, They Found Me, and 4 of the Twitter videos, Puzzle Box, Cookies, Calling Adam, and Matt Quits, were the only ones I personally was not on set to direct. I had a lot of anxiety relying on someone else to film content for my series and do it justice, but I let go. I sort of had to due to the pandemic, and it worked out in the end.
This wasn't the first time I exactly did something without a director, but as far as like just receiving a script and being told to like do these types of things without having like any further direction as an actor, it was a little difficult, like trying to like find the groundwork, because this was like one of the first things I had to do as Daniel. So putting on that character was a little rough the first time without having a director, but I feel like I set some good groundwork for like how the character's supposed to be like further on the series that you guys already saw. So
around this time, the mental health outreach tape went live. I ended up creating a minor world-building event where viewers could apply to the rehabilitative hosting programs seen in the tape. It wasn't important to the story at all, but they still managed to manipulate their way into gathering useful information about George Shepard. This fun activity and the positive viewer reception became the inspiration for another website, one full of case files and owned by one Nick Osborne, or the Walker Creek PI. I wanted a mix of the conspiracy theorist character from the cancelled This Town Has No People ARG, and sort of an X-Files themed corner of the Walker Creek world. They would be standalone cases with mini-puzzles and role-playing to provide world-building and lore about important aspects of Walker Creek that didn't fit into the main story, such as Oliver Dearcott and Thomas Abernathy. However, it wasn't time to start it just yet. March ended with a critical decision in regards to Walker Creek. Instead of only playing Adam as a voice actor, I would play him on camera too. He was quickly becoming more beloved by fans, more important in the story, and more interesting to me. I started writing him into the main story, and even planning a new segment where I'd answer calls from viewers in character as Adam. I wrote some lore about Adam growing his hair out over quarantine, and designed the April Fool's puzzle chain to make fun of ARG cliches and reveal his new look. Me. I had hoped that the concept of Adam changing his appearance by growing his hair out would be enough for them to accept the appearance of his entire face changing too. And somehow, as stupid as it was, it worked. So now it was time to make him show up. April began with Words from Adam Live. I wanted to connect with viewers in a way that truly made Walker Creek feel alive. The whole goal of the ARG was to create a living, breathing world, and what better way to do that than literally talking to one of the main characters. It's so much more real than just watching an immersive video or texting on Discord, and to be honest, I loved it. It was so fun to finally be able to speak to the viewers. I knew I couldn't break character on my main channel or anything, but this was the closest I could get. I could talk about the lore, the future of the puzzle sequences, and answer questions about Walker Creek overall. It was unimaginably fun. On the production side, the next video was Sanders' mine exploration. It was a tricky one. I wanted this vlog to include Adam and be linked to Nick's introduction, all while introducing Matt and the larger world of Walker Creek. I knew I really had to sell it. It followed the same production format as all of the other Matt vlogs, hiking a few miles and recording B-roll and story-focused clips along the way, with the longest key scene left for when we got to our destination. This was basically how we did every outdoor vlog.
The day that we had to hike out for 2 miles up to a mine, oh my god, that was just pain. I just didn't want to do this anymore.
Sanders' mine exploration changed so many times in so many ways. It went from nothing happening at the mine to a full conversation with Adam inside the mine. Then we had to cut a whole scene set after the Adam conversation because it was getting dark. I added some other random voice lines like a month later to put over B-roll, and I re-recorded all the dialogue for the Adam and Matt scene to add in later. This was the process for really every single Matt vlog and every other video. Every piece of content that you see in Walker Creek is held together with string and duct tape. There are scenes cut, scenes changed, lines written and recorded a month after filming, re-recorded dialogue, B-roll recorded 2 months later getting spliced in, and so much more. This same month, we made Waterfield Park Setback. It took 2 days, and this vlog actually had the first mention of Nick, even though I hadn't designed his website or anything about him. I just knew that he would be a definitive part of the series, and that he would be introduced by the time this vlog went up in July. With this episode, I brought in Michael to play Thomas Abernathy again. This was intended to be the conclusion to the Thomas case file I had planned for Nick's website, though the plan was a lot larger and more important than the final version would end up being. In the meantime, I was working on another tape, Pillars of Our Community, which was a cult recruitment themed video. However, this morphed into community dinner etiquette. I created it in a few days, threw together a simple, creepy, culty chant, in which I used Ariana yet again. She was becoming an important resource for me, but she didn't have a character. Yet. By this point, the following tape, Guide to Newcomers, was mostly finished, minus the worm scene due to delays with the prop. Anna and I had begun working on it all the way back in early March with this concept art. We based its design off of a prop making video for the chest burster from Alien. We are currently working on the worm for Walker Creek. We put 2 layers of aluminum foil, and it looks like a banana, but it will one day look like a worm, and it will go in the series. We made an aluminum foil body, then covered it in liquid latex, and finally painted it gray. This was my first time ever making a prop, and while it could have turned out better, it was definitely not bad. Finally, we filmed the Guide to Newcomers clip with the worm, and prepared to film more soon, mainly 7/22/89 and Terror in Ramsey Park. However, one last thing happened before April ended, something a bit more personal. Anna and I broke up. The future of the series, at least with the tour guide's character, was in jeopardy. I decided to just ignore this at the time and keep going with my existing plans for Walker Creek. May 2021 was the big month. Originally, March was supposed to introduce Matt, David, and Daniel within a few weeks of each other. Then it was going to happen in April. Finally, it ended up being May due to filming and editing delays. I wanted it to be big, and with what was happening in my personal life, I needed it to be big. I needed to throw myself into my work again, regardless of my physical or mental well-being. Luckily, this was the perfect time to do so. Daniel Shepard was about to make his debut, not as text on a screen, but as a real character. Matt was going to join the series, and beyond that, I had finally realized who Light Drinker 97 should be and what their purpose was. Dr. Andrea Illman, the leader of the Walker Creek Observatory, researcher of the Harvest Star, and secretly, Nathaniel Topaz, leader of the Rebellion. Despite my personal life, the series was going well. The first to be published was Matt. I wanted to make a splash, so I designed a little lead-up event for his debut. Then for Daniel, I orchestrated an entire puzzle sequence based around George Shepard, ending with the reveal of Adam knowing about Daniel. I then made viewers wait over a day to see what would happen. I enjoyed playing with them like this. For example, I had Daniel go answer a knock at the door on Twitter, and then go silent for 10 minutes to freak them out. this kind of interaction and tension was something I ended up employing a few more times later on, with Thomas Abernathy and the death of Nick Osborne. With immersive, realistic storytelling like this, there are so many more opportunities for tension and audience reactions. Right after Matt's debut came the Founders Day event. This idea had come to me a month prior as a way to increase viewer participation and make the alternate reality game more of an actual game. Competing for points and rewards sounded like fun, and I wanted to expand the world even more with some lore about the Unifier and James Lambert. It took a few days to design the event, and while it wasn't very creative, it was a baseline for future events. Viewers seemed to enjoy it as a break from the serious, cryptic puzzle-based activities, and I realized that these events could be an opportunity to sell more merchandise, themed around the event and similar to video game microtransactions. It actually worked. Not amazingly, since the increase was from about 1 purchase per month with no event to 3 purchases per month when there was an event. But looking at it one way, that's a 300% sales increase. Now, okay, I know this sounds bad, and to be fair, yes, I did just compare Walker Creek merch to microtransactions. But keep in mind that I was never pushy with any monetization, and by the end of the series, I actually lost over $100 on Walker Creek. Anyway, back to Walker Creek's production. We had to film Terror in Ramsey Park next, before we made a complete mess of the worm prop in 7/22/89. And so, once we completed it, it was time for our final main cast member to be introduced, David Trenson, Rebel Leader. This episode was a turning point for the series, with another more complex attempt at a fully acted analog horror video, expanding on the concept of the Louise Peterson tape. This is what I had been building towards. I'd always loved Local 58, and I wanted to truly push the boundaries of what analog horror could be. I felt like it was too static and formulaic. Even I was guilty of falling into those typical formulas. David Trenson's episode was yet another attempt to bring a change of pace to the genre. Viewers of the series took it well, but the analog horror community generally had a lukewarm or negative reaction. Walker Creek's response from that community was always mediocre, and it's why the VHS tapes became a less and less important aspect of the series over time. It wasn't interesting for me to do, and the reception was much better for other types of videos. With 7/22/89, we had to go out into the park at night for 2 days. On the first night we finished most of the wide shot, and on the second night we finished the wide shot and filmed the other 3 angles. Having multiple angles was a technique I employed multiple times in Walker Creek, because if a video has to be filmed in a realistic way, there can't be constant cuts like there are in a film, unless there are multiple cameras. So a news or documentary style multicam setup was the easiest way to get around this and shoot in small segments while still maintaining realism. It was a true pain in the ass to film, and even more so to edit, but it was worth it.
I think the worst part about filming the first time, which was being in a public park, was that there was always people walking by, and the issue is like not all of us are like have the perfect schedule to come together, but it's like the nights that we were able to come together, like we did most what we were supposed to do. We're knocking out the film, we're knocking out the scenes and whatever, but it's like we had to come in for a second day and do it and finish it.
7/22/89 was one of the only videos in all of Walker Creek that was completed with no compromises. Even the news report was edited exactly the way I wanted to. Everything in the script showed up on screen. No cut lines, cut scenes, cut angles, or anything. I was, and still am, incredibly proud of that episode. Walker Creek was reaching its potential. Its world, story, and characters were now fully realized. It had grown from an analog horror project to a full-blown ARG and indie film production. In June, I began working on the message archive. I had been delaying it due to my lack of interest. I honestly didn't even know what I wanted that archive to be, and I considered cutting it, but I had made the promise in November, so I knew I had to finish it. There's not much to say about the work. It was long and tedious and generally miserable. I worked for hours every day for 2 months, on my own, in my room, to write all the content, make all the characters sound distinct, and create interesting plotlines. I brought in aspects like the Barlow Manor and Oliver Deercott, established the benefactor in the observatory, and basically just fleshed out important, interesting aspects of the world for the future of the series. I really wanted to make Walker Creek feel alive. This world was my escape. It was my way of staying afloat, staying busy, and a way to focus on a world and on a life other than my own. The summer of 2021 was bad. It was yet another low point, brought upon by sheer loneliness and exhaustion from the increased workload of Walker Creek. But the message archive was the ultimate culmination of my escape. Hundreds of pages of writing, with unknown events and characters being shown off, and existing events and characters getting elaborated on and fully brought to life. It was really a triumph. It was insanely hard to stay motivated. But eventually I did finish, and it was kind of amazing. I think the message archive, more than anything, represents how Walker Creek really was a labor of love. There was almost nobody watching or reading, and I went through hell to create it every single day for 2 months, just because I truly wanted to tell this story. It was a low point for me. There's not much more to say, but just know that throughout all of June and July, it was always there, for several hours, every single day. Right after 7/22/89, the Sanders Mine vlog from Matt went live, and with it, the WCPI website. I had almost cancelled that aspect of the ARG altogether, both because I didn't want to add even more to my workload, and because it was really one of those wild ideas that I just sort of ran with without thinking about it. By the time it went live, I had realized that Nick was largely irrelevant, with little to no impact on the series, especially with how late he came in, since I originally wanted him to start in March or April. In the end, I kept it. He was a fun side aspect that helped to build the world and make it feel more alive. But his cases and death meant very little. If he had been cut, the series would have been mostly unchanged. In retrospect, I feel like Nick and Trevor should have been merged into one character. Both of them served the same purpose: world building. Both characters were older, more serious people with knowledge of the inner workings of Walker Creek and its history. Both characters were largely irrelevant to the main story. If they had merged, Trevor would once again be relevant, and their death would have had way more impact. But I didn't think of this until the end of May. Too late. I was good at planning in advance, but clearly not good enough. My improvisational attitude would never work 100% of the time in a live project like this, which is also shown with the sheer number of Nick Osborne case files that ended up being cut. Around this time, I was also working on the 6/29 Rebel Attack event, the message archive, and filming for Mavlog 6 Denton Entrance, as well as LightDrinker97's fourth report, Friend. I was drowning in so many moving parts, but it was necessary for the series. These 2 videos cemented Adam as a character, and reintroduced Luke in the modern day, which I did love. He was this hosted Terminator-type character, and while it wasn't perfect, he actually did feel pretty threatening. I was now playing Adam and Luke, 2 major characters in Walker Creek. I didn't have enough actors, so I made do. And these videos turning out well was a much-needed win. My main focus for the end of June and the beginning of July was the flashback vlogs, an idea I had to break the monotony of the series so far, another unique ride in my theme park of horror. Except this ride was a serious drama, not a horror piece. With Walker Creek taking all of my time away from making drama short films, I decided to just make drama short films within Walker Creek. This field is very versatile, and it's criminally underused when it comes to other genres and storytelling techniques. I do wish I saw more dramatic ARGs.
Well, I feel like having like the contrast between like this being like a super serious, like this is like the fate, not the fate of the world, but like a very like dangerous situation for these characters to be in, paralleling it with situational things where it's like 2 friends just like hanging out, having a good time. I think that made a really good contrast for the series. I think that taking it away from like what you expect from like a horror type of ARG was very like good for the series. I think it really just made it, I don't know, more of like something that's really happening and not like something that's just like, you know, only getting like the scary or like the serious portions of it, you know.
I used the 5 flashback videos to do a few important things for the series. I wanted to truly make Matt and Daniel feel like friends, since the modern day story couldn't really give viewers that feeling.
It was kind of like a downtime kind of thing. It's like in Avengers Age of Ultron when they're like in the house and they find out that Hawkeye has kids. It's like downtime, you know, it's like separation from the actual plot that's going on, and it actually just provided for more characterization for Matt and Daniel, which was really fun to explore. And like I said before, I was just like with my best friend Connor, who plays Matt the entire time. So I'd say like it definitely added a really good contrast, and I really enjoyed doing both, honestly.
As well as this, I wanted to set up Daniel's conflict with his father, and how Daniel left Walker Creek and Matt behind to move on to bigger things. This was incredibly important for the emotional themes of the story and the character arcs of both Matt and Daniel, but it was also cathartic for me. I was able to finally go back to drama and make films about things that were truly important to me. I mean, that's what Walker Creek always was, to be honest. I won't go into detail on messages or themes because I don't want to have a death of the author thing going on here, but Walker Creek really has a lot of my thoughts and feelings about the world and about my own life poured into it. It may be an ARG, but it's a story like any other. It has to have a theme, a message, a purpose for existing. For Walker Creek, you could say it's about religion, about politics, but mostly it's about more personal aspects, about family issues, about finding purpose, about how life changes and people leave. So making these things come to life on screen was important to me. And in my opinion, it made for some pretty great videos too, particularly the fifth one, my favorite, Moving On. Moving On was the first Walker Creek video that I made set to a specific song. Before this point, all music had merely been in the background, but Moving On contained This Manhattan Man by the Altogether. And really that song was a driving force behind the entire video, just as Murders by Miracle Musical was the driving force behind the He Followed Me vlog. Misery Fell by Tally Hall was the driving force behind the road trip scene in the finale, and Fate of the Stars, also by Tally Hall, was the driving force behind the epilogue. Music is incredibly important to me, and it's one of my other obsessions outside of filmmaking and ARGs. It was hard to incorporate music into Walker Creek in an immersive way, but it was something that I was dead set on doing. I know a few people may have disliked it, but I don't really care. I thought it was great, and I was making Walker Creek for myself after all. My own enjoyment was the top priority. Though, I still had to do some things that were not for my own enjoyment. I had to keep making the analog horror videos. Walker Creek had spiraled so far out of its original premise, and I was much more interested in the modern day aspects. But the analog horror was, and still is, the most popular part of Walker Creek. It was still key to the main plot, so I had to keep going. In the middle though, you can definitely tell that the quality wavers, especially in videos like survey results. With the observatory report tape in July, I did try to restore some of the quality, uniqueness, and effort of the previous tapes. I knew that I had to bring in Andrea Illman somehow to introduce her as a character before the Light Drinker reveal, so I decided to have her narrate this tape. A fully voiced analog horror video was already on my bucket list, and if it was up to me, all of them would have been voiced, but that requires a budget that I don't have. What I did have, though, was Ariana, who still did not have a character, and so she was cast as Andrea Illman. Observatory Report was part of a small arc in the series, since its release a few weeks later was within days of the Light Drinker 97 episodes showcasing the Observatory database, which by the way was a real website and a public one. He Followed Me was my next target, continuing with Luke and his attacks on Matt, including the first on-screen shapeshifter transition. I ended up almost cutting it because it didn't look perfect and I was worried it would be disliked. But when it comes to such a small independent project like this, there aren't many opportunities for cool effects or showing off the monsters. It was a way to increase the production value of Walker Creek, even if it wasn't perfect. And with a series or ARG like this, every effort to increase production value should always be taken. There are way too many projects that take the easy way out. The shoot day for He Followed Me was also technically the first shoot day for the finale episodes. The story and character arc of Matt had drastically changed over time, with him originally being hosted after this vlog, getting tortured, fighting Daniel in the finale, and eventually dying. These were all cut.
I'm gonna just be completely honest. I hate the new change. I wish my character died. That would have been so cool.
I settled on Adam blackmailing him instead. We shot these scenes on the same day as the rest of the vlog. Publicly at this time, Thomas Abernathy was begging for help on Twitter. Interesting, dynamic viewer interaction was always a key aspect of Walker Creek, and a key aspect of every ARG. This time period, with Nick's case files and the Thomas Abernathy Twitter account, were basically peak Walker Creek on the social side. There was constant content and interaction, with a lot more debate than I expected on how to deal with Abernathy. And of course, I had to play it up and try to make viewers feel even more emotional pain. I might have taken it too far, but it was still great. July also had the Lake Denton kayak race event, in which I took the same concept as the Founders Day event and expanded on it, because there's always room for a quality increase in every aspect. There were more activities, more rewards and merchandise, more features such as the leaderboards and betting. It was a more dynamic, interesting, and overall fun event. The final week of July was focused on filming the episode Harvest Festival 1989. Out of all of the filmed videos, I think this one is my least favorite. There were a lot of compromises made for this one. I wanted to have more extras on set. I wanted a more visually interesting location. I wanted more camera angles. I wanted Luke to be featured more. It was the climax of the VHS tape storyline, and it could have been a lot better. But we had time constraints. It was late at night, and we already had to take 2 days to shoot it, alongside a whole host of other issues. So, what's done is done. It wasn't horrible, it wasn't even bad, but when I look at it, I just see missed potential. After that, I was finishing up Matt's vlogs with Connor. They weren't that complicated, and by the end of the month, we finished the last 3. Secrets of Lake Denton, Plan of Attack, and Final Preparations, with minimal compromises. We got the lake scenes done, the Matt monologuing, and even some dialogue scenes with Adam in Connor's home office. Matt's portion was finished.
You know what? Honestly, I was kind of sad. I really did have fun doing the solo vlogs. It was just nice to be just me and Alex being able to just, film Walker Creek.
The production of Walker Creek was already wrapping up, though that wrap would be much, much slower than I anticipated. To cap off July, I finished the message archive. I was more depressed, stressed, burned out, and tired than ever, but I finished it. 600 pages of content, 25 puzzles, a unique custom encoding method, lore on the benefactor, the speaker, Barlow Manor, and really anything else you can think of. And then, almost nobody read it. I can't say I wasn't disappointed, but I wasn't surprised either. It's just the 99-1 rule in action. 90% of the audience skims the content, 9% might be active participants sometimes, and only 1% of the audience actually cares enough to dive deep, so most of the content is being made for that 1%. You can look at the subscriber counts of the other channels versus the subscriber counts of Walker Creek Broadcast Station to see. It almost perfectly works out to 9% paying attention to the deeper aspects of the series. I knew that the whole time, focusing on deep lore references and refusing to dumb down any of the storyline in the message archive or anywhere else in the series. I did make it as accessible as possible with the Walker Creek Complete playlist, the end screens linking to other channels' videos, links in the descriptions, Twitter posts, and so much more, which did help bring players to other aspects of the series, keep in mind. But at the end of the day, most people just won't dive deep. It sucks, but that's just how it works, so keep that in mind too if you're an ARG creator. My point is, I was incredibly demoralized and incredibly burned out. I wouldn't say all-time low because that would be the isolation time period, but it was close. I was bitter, angry, tired, depressed, and alone. I remember recording this really depressing audio message as Adam for the puzzle chain. It was unscripted, and barely even in character. This has taken many months, and I am incredibly glad it is finally over, and I am incredibly tired of working on it and working on many different projects for this county. I did get one piece of motivation at the very end, though. The YouTube creator Wendigoon said he was going to make a video on Walker Creek. And then he never did, at least as of the making of this documentary, but that's besides the point. It helped at the time. Depression and the intense feeling of being completely burned out didn't matter. I pushed forward, and we began production on the final filmed tape, Chair for Humans. It once again took 2 days. It was shot in Elijah's garage. It sounds stupid, but you've got to make do with what you have, and it's better to try with limited resources than to not try at all. With Chair for Humans, it started to hit me that we were really getting close to the end, and that we were about to begin production on the massive finale. When a project is such a massive part of your life for over a year, it gets difficult to let go. Saying goodbye is hard, but it's something that has to be done. Like in this tape, we said goodbye to David Trenson's character.
It was sort of a switch, to be honest. It wasn't like super emotional. It was just sort of like, oh, we're transitioning from here to here. It's like, oh, okay, no, this is what's gonna happen. I guess I'm gonna have to roll with it.
After Chair for Humans, I threw together the proper ending of the tapes. Really an epilogue. Results. I wrapped up the loose ends of the 1980s storyline with some text, and that was really it. As I've already said, the format of analog horror was intensely boring to me by this time. Attempts at change were often met with a neutral or outright negative reaction. The David Trenson tapes were the only ones remotely interesting to me because they were just short films with an analog aesthetic. I simply didn't care about the traditional style tapes anymore, especially now that I had an entire crew and a 70-page finale to film. August wasn't all endings, though. There was the filming of the Adam monologue My Truth, the beginning of his redemption arc. Then there was the filming of Special Message, a video heavily inspired by the game Control, which was the beginning of Daniel's return to Walker Creek and the first time I ever used a green screen in the series. And besides that, the moment I finished the message archive, I began work on the Rebel forum site, which was basically the message archive for the Rebels. Same aesthetic, same content style. I wanted to use it to demonstrate how the Rebels and the Hosted really were two sides of the same coin. Obviously, the Rebels are the quote-unquote good guys, but they're very similar, and at times, equally dark. Like everything in Walker Creek, there was a ton of nuance. That's what made it feel real. Then, there was one other beginning. The final week of August had one of my major goals being accomplished, starting production on the Walker Creek finale episodes. I had been writing the script throughout the entire summer, alongside writing the message archive, shooting the Matt vlogs and flashback episodes, and editing the other dozens of videos. I really wanted to get at least one finale shoot day completed before the end of the month, and we succeeded by filming the web series version of the living room scene. It was time to end this. The finale was the ultimate climax, the conclusion to everything, the culmination of every lore bit, plotline, character, as well as every filmmaking, editing, and directing technique I had learned and developed. I wanted this to fire on all cylinders, be insanely high quality, and basically be the Avengers Endgame of Walker Creek, where everything comes together to form a story that is massive compared to everything before it.
We all kind of run our A game when we were going out there because it was just like a lot of character-driven moments, and I think one of the most important things about shooting the finale was honestly us trying to like find a way to all work together, because we all did come together. It was me and Anna and Emmanuel and Connor, and we all had to figure out how to work on a set together, and I thought that was really nice to figure out how to do, since we all technically like are working together like towards a common goal, which is like to make this ARG as best as we could.
The ideas had been bouncing around in my head for literally months, since October of 2020, and they only became more and more prevalent. Surprisingly, the actual episodes didn't change that much from the first outline in February to the final versions. I had been planning every aspect for months. Daniel would have a driving montage before meeting up with Matt, going to Main Street, and meeting Adam in the park. Then in the second video, they'd goof off waiting for the festival, there would be a confrontation at the lake with the fake Adam death and the Luis, David, and Benefactor reveal, and then finally in the third episode, Daniel would get tortured and escape. And then as an epilogue, the fourth episode would be a short conclusion to all the characters and arcs. The finale's production was difficult. I'll admit, we were more comfortable with filming by this point.
I think the finale shooting was definitely better than the beginning. I think at the end it was like everybody sort of understood like what they needed to do. And
Over time, I did learn how to act as Luis and as a tour guide, so I think it worked out, and
It only got better over time, and surprisingly, I don't know how, but I became a better actor by the end of this all.
we would repeatedly set up the cameras, set up the lights, set up everything. Reading the scripts over and over again. I think the final shooting was definitely. I'm not gonna say it was significantly easier, but it was definitely easier than the beginning.
Comfort with filming wasn't all that mattered, though. There were a lot of pages, a lot of shots, and a lot of lines.
That was like definitely the most lines I've had to say in the entire series.
Add in set drama, time pressure, my own lack of motivation, and general inexperience from the crew, and it was a lot. But I just kept pushing. After the first day in the living room, we came back to film the standalone version for the feature-length cut that is coming soon. The Waterfield Park scene was next on my schedule, taking 2 days to complete. Things were progressing well. I got to show off my favorite outfit and give Adam more character development, which he originally didn't have. Adam was always difficult for me to use, for multiple reasons. He was my favorite, and he always had a much stronger, louder character than everyone else. To put it simply, he stole the show almost every time he showed up, which isn't great when it's supposed to be a story about Daniel Shepard. He had to be balanced. If he became too casual and human, he'd become boring and not Adam. But if he became too cold and distant, he'd just be flat out unlikable. In the end, with enough time and effort, I was able to strike a balance, though I did let him steal the show in the park scene. Our next shoot day was Lake Day. I called it Lake Day and not just the day we filmed at the lake, because this was a special day. The only one where the entire cast was together at the same time. Myself, Anna, Elijah, Connor, and Emmanuel were all there, acting and working as a crew. We'd had several days with 3 or even 4 cast members on set, but never all 5.
well, unlike Connor who played Matt and Elijah who played Daniel, I wasn't really in the series until the very end.
It wasn't just like one person missing. Everyone was on set, and everyone was doing a part, and everyone was having a role in it.
We all got to experience filming as a group because the other days we didn't have everyone there.
I loved annoying my other actors, but
I enjoyed acting with others. It was a new experience for me.
It was the largest group I've ever had to direct, and the biggest scene I've ever had to orchestrate. With that large of a cast, it was tiring and exhausting. There were a lot of issues.
The Lake Day was interesting because there was a lot of things that went wrong on that day.
that day was just that was definitely something.
It was fucking chaotic.
I cannot lie, we could have not picked a worse setting.
There was a lot of people in the lake.
There was a lot of people in the lake, on boats.
There was just people on the river.
And obviously we couldn't film those people.
We kept having to refilm, reshoot, redo everything.
There was geese
There was just a lot of geese.
and geese shit all over the place. There was just geese, crying children, elderly people would just walk by the camera.
There were many people walking by, and
It was just a public park.
there was a baby nearby that was crying sometimes. It was just a pain.
It was a pain.
It was just a pain in the ass, that's for sure.
There was a lot of things going on.
However, it was also one of the best shoot days of the whole series.
It was so fun seeing the whole entire cast together.
It was pretty fun.
It was fun, but it was really stressful.
Like, yeah, it was really, really difficult. It was super, super hard. But again, having this all together was really, really fun. I think that was, aside from the montage, the lake was probably my second favorite scenes to shoot.
The lake scene was the most important moment in the series, and one that I had to be prepared for. I had to get the story and script just right, and we had to focus on the main villain, the tour guide, being shown for the first time, with the massive reveal of her secret identity.
It was really new to me, so I just followed Alex's directing, and I tried to apply what he said to the voice, and over time I got the hang of it. I did like playing the villain. Louise Peterson, I did like her as a character, and I wish she had more in the series, but tour guide, I liked her a lot more just because she was there more often, and I liked doing the audios. They were fun. They weren't too difficult, but the actual filming, I got to really express her through the videos.
Of course, this same challenge was also extended to the speaker.
I think it all went down to the voices, because with David Trenson, it was definitely more gravelly and a little bit more rough, while the speaker was a little bit light and a little bit soft. I don't know. I think I preferred David just because it was an easier role to play for me. I think it's because the speaker was a little bit like, I just have to like collect my knowledge of whatever, fiction that I've seen, and I'd just be like, oh, I have to imitate this, I have to do this, and, try to have tips for myself.
This was the scene that defined Walker Creek, in my opinion. It was the culmination of everything, in more ways than one. Lake Day was also the moment where everything hit me all at once, when I realized that my year-long vision was coming true, and that it was coming to a close. I had been dreaming about Lake Day since January 2021. I had been having anxiety about whether or not we'd actually be able to do it since the end of April 2021. And now, it was real. It was right in front of me. Everyone was standing there by the lakeshore. Everyone was reading my scripts, saying the lines I wrote, listening to my directions. They were doing it for me. They were doing it for Walker Creek. They were doing it for my vision. And now that vision was about to be fulfilled. I was directing the most important scene of the series in that moment. I was behind the camera on the final shot of Walker Creek. Thoughts crossed my mind. Is this it? What am I going to do after Walker Creek? How am I going to function without the Discord server to talk to? How am I going to function without shoot days to look forward to, without scripts to write, without videos to edit, without Walker Creek to distract me from my real life? Even as I write this, and I'm sure as I edit too, I feel anxiety that it's ending, because it's been the most important part of my life for 14 months, and I don't know exactly what I'll do after. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. But I knew that it needed to end, and that I wanted it to end. There's no next episode, there's no more shoot days. I have to handle it, just like I did on Lake Day. Besides, there was still another month of shooting left after the lake. Before the end of September, we completed 2 more shoot days, the montage leading up to the Harvest Festival, and our first attempt at filming the mine scene. I say first attempt because the hour-long drive to the park and hour-long hike to the mine, and then back, obliterated our schedule and we couldn't finish on the first day. But just like every failure before it, I just got up and kept going. It definitely wasn't easy. I was under a ton of pressure the whole time about how we were still filming less than a month away from release, and due to some behind-the-scenes drama. When I look back on the finale, that's the part I see. I was going to school 4 days a week and filming on most or all of my free days. When I wasn't filming or doing school, I was editing. When I wasn't editing, I was working on puzzles or other elements to keep viewers busy, like the Sanders Day event around this time. And there wasn't anything else in my life. It wasn't healthy, but it was necessary to keep up a project like this all on my own, day in and day out. I wanted filming to be finished in August, and then in September, but of course, the worst option happened. Filming continued all the way into October. The top priority was the Daniel torture scene, once again in Elijah's garage. This was a 19-page long scene, and by far one of the most complicated ones in the entire series. It was shot over 4 days, with a 2-camera setup. It had minimal changes made to its storyline from its inception in early 2021 to shooting. I always loved the idea of Walker Creek's climax being a full 10 minutes of philosophical debate before the escape, both between Daniel and the tour guide, and between the tour guide and Andrea Illman, who was one of the most important aspects of the scene. I needed to establish Andrea as a solid character and rebel leader, since this was our last chance to do so. The same thing happened with the tour guide, making her a fully fleshed out villain now that her identity as Louise Peterson was revealed. Beyond that though, this scene was what made Walker Creek pass the Bechdel test, something long overdue and very important to me.
I did wish there were other people that were female or presented as female, because it would have been a bit easier and I could have related more. I hope for future series Alex has more females and can include more actors that, have a different relationship than just males and.
While the Bechdel test obviously is not the end-all be-all of representation tests, it is a first step. Representation in Walker Creek and in film overall is very important. There are obviously 2 female characters, both the leaders of the 2 main factions. Beyond that, Matt and Andrea Illman are both members of the LGBT community. I would have gone further, but Walker Creek's overstuffed storyline had little room to focus on romance or other more intimate personal plots. In the midst of the 4 Garage Day shoots was our second attempt at filming the mine scene. This was almost as big as Lake Day, only missing Emmanuel. This was the part of the finale that changed the most. In the original draft, there was going to be an entire chase scene through the halls of the home, with Daniel trying to escape an enraged tour guide. After he gets out, Matt, now one of the hosted, would be waiting for him. They would fight, and Matt would get killed.
I wish my character died. That would have been so cool. Just imagine I had like an epic death sequence and then the end, but somebody was too scared to let one of his favorite characters die.
This, of course, got stripped down and changed into the final product, a happy, smaller ending. Because at the end of the day, not every large-scale or every dark idea is a good one. We were now down to the final pieces. We shot the opening monologue, the opening scene B-roll, and the epilogue B-roll at Elijah's house all on the same day. Our final shoot day, October 12th, 2021, was driving to the road we used for Main Street. This was our final scene, and we finished quickly. The audio of the entire section on the street was recorded after the fact, and added in during editing. Walker Creek being an ARG didn't stop it from using proper filmmaking techniques like ADR. So, we were back at the car recording this ADR. Elijah got to the last line, and...
Well, this is it. Time to get my dad's stuff.
Alright, that's it? That's the last line?
Yeah, that's the last line.
That's a wrap on Walker Creek Broadcast Station! The impossible had happened. Something I wasn't sure I would ever see. Something honestly surreal. Walker Creek was wrapped.
I'd say the final day on set was very, chill because it was just, me, Alex, and Connor, which was really nice. Because it was just, we kind of knew exactly what we were doing when we went there. So I think it was, one of those, more laid-back days, but it was also the last day. So it was weird because I didn't really think about it being the last day. I just kind of thought, okay, we're going out to film. And I even made a joke with Alex afterwards. I was like, oh, hey, when are we gonna, when's the next day that we're gonna shoot? When's the next day that we're gonna do it? He's like, oh, we're done. I'm like, what? We're really done? I was ecstatic.
I was satisfied and I was so happy that it was over with. But I cannot lie, it was fun doing it all in the end.
At the same time, I was like, oh, wow, I don't get to be Daniel anymore.
No matter how much pain, happiness, or sadness, or anger, or joy, any of those emotions, it was fun doing this in the end. I do not regret what I did.
With that, it was time to be alone. I took the footage and focused solely on editing for these next 3 weeks, completely alone until November 2nd. The isolation was stronger in these 3 weeks than any other time in Walker Creek's production, even the lonely summer. There was no filming, just sitting at my computer, day in and day out, finishing this. Throughout Walker Creek's production, it was always just me alone working on the series. Of course, I had several actors portraying different parts, but they were just actors. They didn't have a greater knowledge of the series or contributions in any other way to the editing, planning, writing, community interaction, or anything else.
Honestly, I came into this blind. I didn't know the story, so everything that I did was a pure reaction of just, not knowing.
Despite this, editing was always my favorite part of the filmmaking process. It's the moment where you get to put together the film and see the results of your work come to life. Things were mostly finalized by the final week of October, with only the epilogue and the documentary left to work on. In the final 2 weeks of the ARG, I focused on fulfilling fan requests, bringing characters like Oliver Dearcott and Andrea Illman into the Discord server, getting the message archive finished up, and doing my best to make the series engaging in its final chapter. Over the course of the ARG, I became disillusioned with the community at times. Sometimes it felt like they didn't care or appreciate what I was doing. They often didn't have anything to say about the story, sometimes didn't try hard on the puzzles. I still appreciated them and their interactions, and I was glad to have any viewership at all. But at some of my lowest moments, it really got to me, and made it hard to continue. Over time, though, I had come to realize that they didn't owe me anything. I was doing what I wanted with Walker Creek after all, so now it was time to do what they wanted. The final few weeks of community interaction was more fun and energetic than the previous 6 months combined, to be honest. And now, it was coming to a close. On November 5th, shortly before the epilogue aired, we had our wrap party. It was time to watch the culmination of our work.
We all got to see the story wrap up together.
The production of the series was a long, difficult journey which I had hoped would pay off. I was and still am eternally grateful to the crew for their help. The wrap party was a final goodbye to them. It's been 14 months since I started working on Walker Creek, and it's been now 11 since I brought all of you guys in. And in that time, we have created so much fucking content. Literally, Walker Creek is 100 episodes long, and all but, I think, 15 of those have you guys involved in some way. And it's been amazing, because I have never done a project of this scale before, and I have never been part of something like this before. You know, doing a whole year-long filmmaking series. It's been incredible, and it's thanks to all of you, because without you guys, this would have ended, you know, as a sad little analog horror series in February. So, it just means a lot, and I'm really glad that we got to this point, and I'm really glad that all of you helped me, and yeah, it's a lot. It's been really amazing to edit it and finally, you know, be able to finish this, see the finished product, you know, see this vision come to life, and see all of you helping me bring my vision to life. And yeah, I'm really happy that we got to this point. I'm really proud of all of you for developing as actors, developing as crew members, and I hope that we get to work together again in the future. So, thank you, and this is Walker Creek. The epilogue aired the next day, and the final words from Adam Live occurred on November 7th. Thank you all for calling in. And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great show.
Do have a good retirement. We'll miss you.
Kind regards, Adam. And just like that, it was over. I'm Alex Hera. A year and a half ago, on May 18th, 2020, I began working on an immersive narrative web series, or unfiction project, or ARG, called Walker Creek. I really don't know what you should take away from this story. Is it one of perseverance, hope, and a you can do anything you set your mind to, even a giant project by yourself, kind of attitude? Or is it a warning? A tale of obsession, of mistakes made, and of an obsessive person struggling to stay afloat? I could spin it either way, but I guess in the end, it's just whatever you choose to take away from it. Are you inspired? Are you uncomfortable? Confused? Or are you simply unimpressed? I don't know what I should take away from it. It was, in some ways, the best year of my life, and by far the most productive. This project was so important to me, and I'm glad I completed it, and I'm eternally grateful to everyone who supported me along the way, both in the cast and in the community. But in some ways, Walker Creek was a horrible experience. I dreaded it, hated it, and went through hell because of it. And yet, it was there for me when nothing else was. Through quarantine, through the loss of friends, through a breakup, through my darkest moments. It's more than just a film project for me. It was my constant companion. It has my heart and my soul poured into it. My happiness, my sadness, my anger, and my love. And all my effort to make Walker Creek feel alive worked. It felt alive to me. And when I think back on the production, or the community, or even the fact that it's actually truly over, I feel insanely upset. I've heard from people at film festivals that a project isn't real unless it affects your emotional well-being. If that's true, then Walker Creek is one of the realest projects in all of existence. I'd love to say that I'll try to treat myself better or be easier on myself in my next project, that I'll take a break or something now, but I know myself. And I know that what I'm actually going to do is take all the experience, knowledge, and skill I gained from Walker Creek and use it again in the exact same way. At least, that's the most likely option. Maybe it won't play out that way. Who knows? The future is uncertain. We only know the past. And this is now the past of Walker Creek, of my career, of my life, and of myself. It's time to look forward. The end.